Hi Ultimate Gardeners, welcome back to the Ultimate Gardening channel. My name is Emmanuel Arstead, well known to be the Ultimate Gardener. In today's exciting sprouting video, I'm going to be discussing with you guys on how to properly repot your orchids. So let's jump right into this video. So I brought the camera closer and here's the materials you're going to need to repot your orchid. So number one is your growing medium. You could use bark or orchid moss like I'm using today, or you could use both, which actually I recommend using both because they're really good for the orchid, but this is what I have on hand. And the other thing I have is this like cocoa coir type thing. So natural things like coconut shells, dried up coconut shells, cocoa coir, those are really great for orchids. So I'm gonna be using this sort of as a filler because this is kind of expensive. So to prevent from filling our pot up completely with sphagnum moss, I'm gonna use this sort of as a filler. So once again, you need your orchid medium, whether it be bark, moss, or both. I'm gonna use this one too. You're gonna need your growing pot. I recommend using terracotta because it's actually breathable. Air can go in and out of terracotta and it's great for orchids. You're gonna need a good size. I'm using a pretty big one so I don't have to constantly repot this one. You're gonna need, and of course you're gonna need your orchid and some water. You could also repot your orchids in these clear ones that they always come in, but just make sure you're constantly checking up on the roots. So let's talk about step number one. So step number one is you have to pre-soak all your materials before repotting. So whether it be moss, whether it be bark, or whether it be cocoa liner, you want to pre-soak it or pre-moisten it so your orchid could be introduced to some moisture bubbles automatically, because it's going to be transplanted. So I'm going to go ahead and soak my moss up a little bit with this bag of water I have here, because I'm only going to do bit by bit because it's going to be layered, which I'm going to teach you guys in a second. So let me go ahead and do step one, which is pre-soak your moss. So here I have this terracotta pot right here. So I'm going to first put the layer of cocoa coir at the bottom. Then I'm going to go ahead and get my orchid moss that's been pre-soaking and then put it down in here like so. So I'm gonna soak a little bit more orchid so you guys can get the deal. You're gonna put orchid moss, cocoa coir, orchid moss, sort of think of it as a lasagna. When I have that done, I'm gonna come back for the repotting part of the orchid. You're gonna go ahead and get your pot. You're gonna make a little well in it, like so. You're gonna get your Phalaenopsis orchid. I already went ahead and I roughed up the roots a little bit, moved around that sphagnum moss so it can introduce the roots to newer rooting area, because as you can see, it was not growing here, so it was starting to send all its roots out. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this, place it down in here, like so, and tamp some of that orchid moss all around your orchid base and fill up those gaps, because you don't want very little growing medium. Be a little bit generous. You're repotting an orchid, so you don't have to repot it every year. And like that, your orchid is repotted and ready to go. One thing I recommend is water your orchid very good. Something I don't really understand is that So your orchid has been repotted. So now let's talk about some care tips when it comes to orchids that are repotted. So to main gardeners, your orchid has been repotted and ready to grow on in its new pot. Here's a few things you need to learn when it comes to newly transplanted orchids. Number one, right when you transplant your orchid, give it a good deep watering. Like any other plants, when they're transplanted, give it good ample amount of water. I know what some people do is literally dunk their orchids in a bucket of water, let them sit there for a good like 5 minutes, and they take them out, let them drain out of excess water, and they're good. One thing is to note, like any other gardener has stated, is be careful in putting water in the center of the crown, because that will encourage fungicide growth as well as rotting, which is the main problem a lot of beginner gardeners that are growing orchids tend to have when they're watering. Some water splashes in there and they leave it there and it rots out your orchid from the base. If you by accidentally drop some water in there, just take a Q-tip, clean it off very gently, and you're good to go. So make sure you really good soak your orchid down when it's newly transplanted. And after that, you could go ahead and water it one time every week. Number 2 is fertilizer. I know when it comes to orchids, their natural growth is to grow in trees and everything, and they don't really get a natural fertilizer. But I have noted from personal experience, fertilizing your orchids is the best thing you could do, because it gives them a lot of nutrients and it allows them to bloom, grow foliage, bigger roots, healthier roots. But don't use any like regular flower fertilizer, granule fertilizer you have. Use a liquid concentrated one that you're able to spray on the roots. That's the ones that work best. I made a video on how to save a clearance orchid. I showcased to you guys the liquid soluble fertilizer you guys should use. My neighbor sprays her roots every single time, and you should see how stunning and breathtaking her orchids looks. So spray the roots, not the foliage. Spray the roots with your vitamin and keep on every month fertilizing it, even during its peak blooms, because that will encourage reblooming. Number 2 is when you have your flowers that have died back, don't cut the stem all the way unless it's completely dried out. If it's completely dried out, cut it off completely. But if not, just leave it there, because my neighbor's orange orchid that I showcased in that particular video stopped blooming, and then it started reblooming from the same tip of the orchid, which is mind-blowing. Or it will send a side shoot from one of those nodes. So just make sure you constantly water your orchid and keep it well fed, because your orchids are a prized possession to have, but there's a delicate plant to take care of. Oh, another thing, they really love sun. So if you have an area where you can expose them to sun, that is great. But if you're in indoors, give them as much sun as you can from an indirect windowsill. So that's gonna be it for this exciting sprouting video, you guys. I had so much fun filming this video. Hopefully you guys found something new about repotting your orchids, because I definitely learned my fair share when it comes to repotting orchids. So thank you all so much for watching. May God bless you and your family, and never forget to grow big, ultimate gardeners. Bye guys.